everyone! I'm Maki! One of the most appealing aspects of the Gundam series is its powerful battle scenes. The creators reflect the characteristics of the mobile suits and even the personalities and mental states of the characters in these scenes. This time, let's take a closer look at a battle scene from the original 0079 series together. The Gouf is piloted by Rambo Rao. The other is the Gundam, piloted by the protagonist Amuro. What techniques and emotions are reflected in their battle? Let's observe it together. In this episode, I'll be sharing my own analysis and interpretation of the scene. Please remember that this is just one of many possible interpretations. Support my channel by becoming a member for just 99 cents per month. As a thank you, you receive a name badge and comment stamps. Now, let's begin the analysis. The Gundam rescues the gun cannon and challenges the Gouf to a fight. Amuro realizes that there is very little ammunition left in the beam rifle, so he abandons it. He then draws his beam saber. This is a very famous scene. Seeing Amuro switch immediately to close combat without clinging to his ranged weapon impresses Rambo Rao, who remarks that he is a formidable pilot. The Gouf then discards its shield and draws its heat sword. Recognizing the Gundam's capabilities, Rao chooses to attack with everything he has. He is a soldier dispatched under direct orders from the Zobi family, the rulers of the Principality of Zeon. He is acting under Dudley Zobi's orders to avenge Gamma Zobi. It is reasonable to assume that he has also received information about Swordsmanship's battles with the Gundam. If so, it is reasonable to believe that he knew about the Gundam's extraordinary defensive strength. Rao believes that he cannot defeat the Gundam unless he uses the most destructive attack possible. He chose a method that involved using both arms to swing the heat sword with all his strength. The way the Gouf holds its sword in this scene is open to many interpretations. Similar fighting methods exist in Japanese swordsmanship. Let's analyze the Gouf's stance using the principles of the renowned Satsuma Jigenru school. A key principle of this swordsmanship is the belief that you should never doubt your first strike. In other words, it is a style that aims to defeat the opponent with the first attack. Rather than fighting the enemy for a long time, the aim is to achieve victory quickly by giving it your all. Rao understood that the Gundam performed better than the Gouf. Therefore, he chose to increase his agility by discarding his shield and maximizing his attack power by holding the sword with both hands. This approach aligns with the principles of Satsuma Jigenru. However, this stance can be interpreted in many different ways. In Japanese swordsmanship, for example, it is believed that discarding your scabbard signifies acceptance of your own death. A scabbard is an object used to store a sword. Throwing away the scabbard that stores your sword can be interpreted as a declaration that you do not expect to put the sword away again. In the Gouf's case, the heat sword is stored inside the shield. Near the beginning of the battle scene, the animation deliberately shows the Gouf drawing the sword from the shield. This shows the audience that the Gouf has discarded its shield. At the end of the battle, Rao says that Amuro won because of his mobile suit's performance. Therefore, the earlier scene in which he draws the sword from its scabbard and discards the shield could be interpreted as showing that Rao had already predicted a future in which he would either achieve victory at the cost of his own life or be defeated. How would you interpret this scene? I think Rao acted with the intention of doing everything he could to win. However, I think it is perfectly fine for there to be many different interpretations. And then the battle began. Rao had been serving as a mobile suit pilot since before the 1-year war started. He eventually became a famous ace pilot, known as the Blue Giant Star. Try to observe the Gundam's pilot from Rao's perspective. The Earth's Federation forces finally succeeded in developing a mobile suit 9 months after the war began. What kind of person would you assume the Gundam's pilot to be? You might predict that he was a pilot with little combat experience. Bearing this in mind, observe the Gundam's actions. We can see it charging forward while protecting its body with its shield. The Gundam has extremely high defensive strength. As I mentioned earlier, Rao should already be aware of the Gundam's high defensive strength. Nevertheless, it is still moving while protecting its body with its shield. Could Rao have predicted that the enemy would prioritize his own safety, block the first attack with his shield, and then launch his own attack once the opponent had stopped moving? Satsuma Jigenru is a sword technique that delivers extremely powerful attacks. In fictional works, it is often depicted as cutting through an enemy's armor or slicing their shield and body in half. Rao decided to challenge the beginner pilot who was trying to block the attack with his shield, using a technique that would cut through both shield and body. Another characteristic of Satsuma Jigenru is shouting loudly at the moment of attack. Rao shouts loudly as the Gouf swings its sword. So, what actually happened in the battle? The Gouf cut the Gundam's shield in half with one clean slice. Made from the same lunar titanium alloy as the Gundam's armor, the shield was incredibly strong. Yet the Gouf's heat sword still cut it completely in half. Furthermore, the arm that delivered the strike did not stop after cutting through the shield, continuing downward until it reached the limit of its range of motion. Rao's attack had truly achieved enough power to destroy the Gundam. However, Gundam was not there. At the moment the Gouf launched its attack, the Gundam leapt into the air. Amuro had used the shield as a decoy to leave the enemy defenseless for a moment. I interpret this attack as the first demonstration of Amuro's new type abilities. Amuro was originally an ordinary boy. He was not a soldier or master swordsman. It would have been difficult for him to read the thoughts of the highly experienced Rao. However, he understood the nature of Rao's attack. Could this mean that Amuro could read Rao's thoughts using his new type abilities? Alternatively, it could be interpreted as Amuro using the intuition he had developed through combat experience to predict Rao's actions. After evading the Gouf's attack, the Gundam strikes the Gouf with its beam saber. However, the strike is too shallow and fails to completely destroy the Gouf's cockpit. Despite his masterful ability to predict the enemy's attacks, he fails to deliver a blow that can completely defeat his opponent. This scene also reflects Schwarzenegger's point at the climax of the story that even a new type cannot improve at physically carrying out actions without training. Although Amuro was able to accurately understand and evade the enemy's attack, he still struggled to carry out the precise action needed to defeat his opponent. What would have happened if Amuro had attacked with the determination to defeat the enemy, even if it meant getting injured himself? The beam saber would probably have penetrated the cockpit more deeply and defeated Rao. However, due to his lack of combat experience, Amuro unconsciously resisted moving closer to the enemy. Consequently, he was unable to defeat Rao with this attack. In contrast, Rao immediately launched a counterattack after being struck by the beam saber. This causes the Gundam to instantly leap backward. Despite being hit by the enemy's attack, Rao remained calm and fought back. Had he not counterattacked at that moment, the heat of the beam saber would have taken his life. This scene illustrates the difference in combat experience between the two pilots. The next scene shows the conclusion of the battle between the Gouf and the Gundam. Although Amuro's first attack fails, the experience allows him to grow significantly. Let's watch the battle unfold. Rao launches his final attack. Once again, he grips his sword with both arms and charges forward with all his strength. Based on the previous clash, Rao had concluded that the enemy pilot was inexperienced and mentally unprepared for combat. That assessment was correct. In fact, Amuro had delivered a shallow strike and failed to destroy the Gouf. However, as I mentioned earlier, Amuro improved after just one clash. Let's take a closer look at the next scene. The Gouf's heat sword is approaching the Gundam's cockpit. Only the sword is visible, with no sign of the Gouf's body. The sword is only moments away from reaching the cockpit. If it had been Amuro just a little earlier, he would have been overcome by fear and caused the Gundam to leap backwards. When the Gouf counterattacked earlier, Amuro chose to evade. If he had continued to attack while blocking the enemy's strike with his shoulder or arm, he could have won. Unlike Amuro, Rao managed to counterattack while the enemy was striking his own body. However, Amuro chose to evade. Having observed the Gundam's actions, Rao predicted that the enemy pilot would choose to evade again. That is why he made the Gouf charge forward at full speed. His goal was to defeat the enemy before they could escape after beginning to evade. Of course, a Gouf sprinting forward at full speed is faster than an opponent moving backwards. Later on, we see a shot of the Gouf swinging its sword with all its might. Even if the Gundam leapt slightly backwards, Rao intended the sword to still hit it. Rao intended to defeat the Gundam with this attack. However, his prediction turned out to be completely wrong. Amuro chose to wait until the enemy was about to attack before launching a counterattack. This was an option that Amuro would not have been able to consider just moments earlier. It also resembled Rao's earlier action of calmly counterattacking. Amuro is steadily growing in ability. The Gundam then evades the Gouf's attack by lowering its body into the lowest possible stance. It then immediately destroys both of the Gouf's arms with its beam saber. This wonderful battle showcases elements of Rao's thinking as a master swordsman, alongside Amuro's rapid growth and the emergence of his new type abilities. Furthermore, Amuro employs a tactic that is more advanced than Rao's. Rao uses a method whereby he allows the enemy's attack to strike his own body before counterattacking. Amuro evades the enemy's attack at the last possible moment and attacks the instant an opening appears. He learns from the enemy's actions, refines them, and launches an even more powerful attack. Finally, let's consider the idea that Amuro won because of the Gundam's performance. What do you think sets the Gundam apart from the Zeon Force's mobile suits? Is it the high defensive strength provided by Lunar Titanium alloy or the high attack power of beam weapons? Of course, these interpretations are not incorrect. For this discussion, however, let's analyze it from the perspective that the greatest difference was its body structure, which enabled extremely human-like movement. Many reference materials state that the Gundam was designed with an almost abnormal determination to give it the same range of motion as a human body. My favorite Encyclopedia Gundam officials contains similar descriptions. It even says that the engineers of the Earth's Federation forces try to give the Gundam the same range of motion as a human body to a degree that is difficult to understand. At the climax of the battle with the Gouf, the Gundam evaded an attack by lowering its body into an extremely low stance. This was possible thanks to the Gundam's unique design, which was intended to give it the same range of motion as a human body. It was at this moment that the Gundam secured victory with its performance. The Gunkanon probably could not have done the same. Some fans speculate that Amuro might have performed even better in the Gunkanon than in the Gundam. But what would have happened if Amuro had been piloting the Gunkanon in this battle? He probably wouldn't have been able to defeat the Gouf piloted by Rao. If Amuro could only have piloted the Gundam on battlefields where Rosha appeared and used the Gunkanon everywhere else, the outcome might have matched fan predictions. However, it would have been impossible to accurately predict who would appear as an enemy on the battlefield. Ultimately, Amuro was able to defeat powerful enemies precisely because he piloted the Gundam. This makes Rao's statement that Amuro should not become overconfident because he won thanks to the performance of the Gundam even more memorable. However, I also love the words spoken by Captain South Bunning in the 0083 story. He tells the protagonist that if they won because of the Gundam's performance, it means they have developed the necessary piloting skills to bring out that performance properly. In my opinion, the battle against the Gouf piloted by Ranbo Rao is one of the greatest scenes in any history. Please watch this amazing scene again sometime. Of course, remember that today's discussion included many of my own interpretations. I used the Satsuma Jigenru swordsmanship style as a key point in my analysis. However, someone with a greater knowledge of swordsmanship could provide an even more detailed analysis or use a different school of swordsmanship as an example. Please share your opinion in the comments. Thank you for watching until the end. I'll see you again in the next episode.